Okay, so as of yesterday, Parler, the right-wing Twitter alternative where a lot of terroristic threats took place, has been removed from the App Store, both Apple and the Google Play Store, and also now their server access has been removed. They used to have servers through Amazon. Amazon sells server space to a ton of places. I don't know exactly how many. I think some of YouTube runs off of it. Some of Twitter runs off of it. Either way, it's a place that you can, buy server space to run your business online, whatever it happens to be. Amazon basically told Parler, hey, we don't want you on our service anymore if you aren't going to moderate your content. Parler is now suing Amazon because they think that they have breached their rights in some way by refusing to do business with them. So here we have Parler LLC is the plaintiff versus Amazon Web Services Inc. Amazon Web Services will be abbreviated to AWS through much of this document, so just bear that in mind. Nature of the action. This is a civil action for injunctive relief, including a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunctive relief and damages. Last month, Last month, defendant Amazon Web Services Inc., AWS, and the popular social media platform Twitter signed a multi-year deal so that AWS could support the daily delivering of millions of tweets. AWS currently provides that same service to Parler, a conservative microblogging alternative and competitor to Twitter. Oh god, are things like Twitter and Parler referred to as microblogging? That's the most obnoxious Silicon Valley buzzword I've ever heard. Microblogging. I hate that. God damn. When Twitter announced 2 evenings ago that it was permanently banning President Trump from its platform, conservative users began to flee Twitter en masse for Parler. The exodus was so large that the next day, yesterday, Parler became the #1 free app downloaded from Apple's App Store. Yet last evening, AWS announced that it would suspend Parler's account effective Sunday, January 10th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it stated the reason for the suspension was that AWS was not confident Parler could properly police its platform regarding content that encourages or incites violence against others. However, Friday night, on top of trending tweets on Twitter was, "Hang Mike Pence," but AWS has no plans nor has it made any threats to suspend Twitter's account. AWS's decision to effectively terminate Parler's account is apparently motivated by political animus. It is also apparently designed to reduce competition in the microblogging service market to the benefit of Twitter. See, here's the thing. If Amazon owned Twitter, they would maybe have some sort of case that it's some sort of anti-competitive practice. Like they're trying to put another business out of business because it directly competes with their own. However, Amazon does not own Twitter, right? Twitter is its own thing. Amazon happens to provide web hosting services to Twitter, as they do many other large businesses, and they happen to not want to deal with Parler because, again, of the shit that's on Parler. And I don't know about the whole, hashtag hang Mike Pence thing trending on Twitter. I would imagine most of the tweets in regard to that were pointing out that people at the Capitol were chanting that. It wasn't directly calls for that as much as it was pointing out the fact that that was a thing the Capitol rioters were saying. But either way, if you look at Parler, and I have, the content is very different than that on Twitter. It's basically mostly conspiracy theories, some people trolling the right, and yeah, calls to violence, sedition, other sorts of things like that. So I think the equivocation there is off. Doesn't own Twitter yet. Sure. Honestly, I think Google would try and buy Twitter before Amazon, but who knows. Thus, AWS is violating Section 1 of the Sherman Antitrust Act in combination with defendant Twitter. Again, I guess, I've said many times, I'm not a lawyer. I can't tell you on that. You need Legal Eagle or Leonard French to come in here and talk to you about antitrust law, though I'm not sure how versed they are on that. I am versed zero on any law, so I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it seems to me that Antitrust Act would tend to be towards things like monopolistic behavior and anti-competitive stuff. Again, I don't know if this situation breaches that specifically because Parler, it's competing with Twitter. Twitter was not the one who banned Parler. Amazon was. and Amazon does not own Twitter, so... But again, consult an actual lawyer for that one. AWS is also breaching its contract with Parler, which acquired AWS to provide Parler with a third-party notice before terminating service, rather than the less than 30-hour notice AWS actually provided. Finally, AWS is committing intentional interference with prospective economic advantage, given millions of users expected to sign up in the near future. So that's just like their damages claim, like, hey, by doing this, you're blocking us from potential users, that could be monetized, yada, yada, yada. This emergency suit seeks a temporary restraining order against defendant Amazon Web Services to prevent it from shutting down Parler's account at the end of today. Doing so is the equivalent of pulling the plug on a hospital patient on life support. It will kill Parler's business at the very time it is set to skyrocket. So they're basically saying, hey, we want the court to force Amazon to host our web services because they're being anti-competitive, which seems like a pretty bold thing of the court to have to do in terms of, like, injunctive relief, to be like, hey, you have to host this web service. I don't know if they'd do that. This court has, and then it's just why they have subject matter jurisdiction and all jurisdiction in general. Parties. Plaintiff Parler LLC is a Nevada limited liability corporation with its principal place of business in Henderson, Nevada. Parler is the solution to problems that have surfaced in recent years to changes in big tech policy influenced by various special interest groups. Our company, which has a link. Thus, Parler is built upon a foundation of respect for privacy and personal data. Foundation of respect for personal privacy and personal data. In order to get a verified Parler account so you can send, like, DMs and stuff, you have to give them a photo of your driver's license and your social security number. They care very much about your privacy, though. Free speech, free markets, ethical, transparent corporate policy. Defendant Amazon Web Services, Inc. and Amazon.com, Inc. Company is a Delaware corporation with its principal place of business in Seattle, Washington. AWS is the world's leading cloud service provider, capturing a third of the global market. See Global Cloud Infrastructure Market, Q3 2020. This is almost double the next largest competitor and equal to the next three largest competitors combined. AWS generates tens of billions of dollars in revenue annually. According to its own press release, AWS has been the world's most comprehensive and broadly adapted cloud platform. Twitter selects AWS as a strategic provider to serve Timeline's Press Center Amazon. This is why millions of customers, including the fastest growing startups, largest enterprises, and leading government agencies, trust AWS to power their infrastructure, become more agile and lower cost. In short, AWS is the Rolls-Royce of cloud platform providers. Is Rolls-Royce really the... I don't know, maybe it's the Lamborghini. I just feel like Rolls-Royce is a bit of an old metaphor for something that's, like, really nice and luxurious. I don't know. Anyway, what was I going to say? So, Amazon Web Services and Amazon in general. I actually generally agree with the idea that Amazon and Google and stuff are, like, way too big, and they probably should be broken up with antitrust laws. I feel the same way about a lot of companies, Disney, for instance. Like, a lot of these conglomerates are just way too big and have too much power in society, and yes, they probably should be broken up. However, I don't think, as it stands currently, I don't think Parler being removed from Amazon Web Services in and of itself is the thing that's going to do it, nor do I think what they're doing is specifically an anti-competitive act. I think they just want to get them off their services because Parler's awful and had a part in fomenting, I always pronounce it so wrong, fomenting insurrection attempts, right? Like, that's a reason, and I think the court will probably come out on that side, but who knows. Facts. Parler contracts with AWS to provide the cloud computing services Parler needs for its apps and website to function on the internet. Further, that both the apps and the website are written to work with AWS's technology. To have to switch to a different service provider would require rewriting that code. Meaning Parler will be offline for a financially devastating period. See, that's interesting. Because the one of the head people at Parler just the other day, when it was announced that they were going to have to switch, we're like, we're fine, we're going to switch this over in a week to another service and it'll be fine. I assume that was a lie then, if it's claiming in this that they're going to have to do a bunch of rewriting to move it over to other services. Parler is also a competitor of Twitter, as both provide a similar platform for users to communicate with short messages, links, and pictures. Like many social media platforms, Parler's business model is not based on subscription fees. Less than a month ago, AWS announced with a press release a new multi-year deal with Twitter. AWS will provide global cloud infrastructure to deliver Twitter timelines. Twitter Select. AWS is a strategic provider to serve timelines. Press Center, Amazon. According to the deal, Twitter will leverage AWS's proven infrastructure and portfolio of services to support delivery of millions of daily tweets. This expansion onto AWS marks the first time that Twitter is leveraging the public cloud to scale their real-time service. This deal built on the company's more than a decade-long collaboration, where AWS continues to provide Twitter with storage, compute, database, and content delivery services to support its distribution of images, videos, and content. What is more, together, Twitter and AWS will create an architecture that extends Twitter's on-premises infrastructure to enable them to seamlessly run and scale in real-time services globally, increasing its reliability and rapidly move new features into production all around the world. So basically, it's just a press release that said, like, hey, AWS is still partnering with Twitter. Here's all the new things as part of our deal. Not that controversial. Pretty standard. At the same time, Parler began to significantly increase its usership at the expense of Twitter. After the election in November, New York Times reported that millions have migrated to alternative social media and media sites like Parler. Mike Isaac and Kellen Browning fact-check on Facebook and Twitter. Some conservatives switched their apps. In fact, less than a week after Election Day, between November 3rd and November 8th, Parler's app experienced nearly 1 million downloads. See Parler, a conservative Twitter clone, has sent nearly a million downloads since election. This resulted in Parler rocketing to be the #1 free app on the iOS store, up from number 1,023 just a week earlier. Likewise, in that same week, the Parler app went from 486th to 1st in Google Play rankings. Not surprisingly, the app was the 10th most downloaded social media app in 2020, with 8.1 million new installs. Jonathan Schreiber, Parler jumps to #1 on App Store after Facebook and Twitter banned Trump. Again, yeah, all that's true. Parler has been incredibly popular after the election with right-wing people for a variety of reasons. Doesn't really have a bearing on the claims here, right? The claim is that they're engaging in anti-competitive practices, and the fact that they were doing well, sure, they were doing well, but they also, the reason they banned you is because you weren't moderating your content and allowing, like, terroristic threats to stay up for long periods of time. By the way, do you guys know how Parler's moderation system works? It's amazing, and by amazing, I mean terrible. Parler. So on Twitter, if you report a tweet for being, you know, a terroristic threat or a threat of violence or something that's not okay, whatever you happen to report it for, it goes to, like, a Twitter moderator after, like, a week or however long it takes to get up in their queue, and then a person analyzes it who works for Twitter, and then they deem it okay or not. On Parler, if a tweet, whatever they call a tweet on Parler, I don't know, if that gets reported, 10 random users, or maybe it's 5 random users, I think it's 5 random users from Parler get put on a jury to decide whether or not the offending content is okay or not. So basically, it's a hive of scum and villainy where they have to police themselves. It's a place full of people inciting violence and spreading conspiracy theories that get to decide if other conspiracy theories and incitements of violence are okay. It's the exact opposite of moderation. It's crazy.
That's right, capitalistic propaganda.
In 2021, this trend not only continued, it accelerated thanks to Twitter's announcement 2 days ago that it would permanently ban President Trump from its platform. On that day, last Friday, Parler saw installs increase in the United States by 355%. After Twitter's announcement, conservative politicians and media figures began encouraging their followers to switch to Parler. Top conservative figures are tweeting to advertise their Parler accounts after Trump was permanently banned on Twitter. Business Insider, speculation began to mount that President Trump would likewise move to Parler, given the close to 90 million followers the president had on Twitter. This would be an astronomical boon to Parler and a heavy blow to Twitter. I more saw rumors that he might go to Gab, but sure, there were people who were speculating he would go to Parler. Given the context of Parler's looming threat to Twitter and the fact that the Twitter ban might not long muzzle the president if he switched to Parler, potentially bringing tens of millions of followers with him, AWS moved to shut down Parler. Again, their supposition seems to be that this was entirely based on some sort of anti-competitive conspiracy to sit down between Amazon and Twitter and say, we need to shut them down because they're going to take away Twitter's users or whatever. When in reality, it's like, hey, we're getting a lot of public pressure because your website is full of terrorists and conspiracy theorists and racists, and we'd rather not be financially entangled with you. Yesterday evening at 6:07 Pacific Standard Time, web news site BuzzFeed posted an article with screenshots of a letter from AWS to Parler, informing Parler that its accounts would be suspended at 11:59 p.m., less than 30 hours later. See John Pakowski. Then there's a, citation. Strangely, the article with the letter was posted before Parler itself received the letter in an email, received at 7:19 PST, over an hour after BuzzFeed's article went online, meaning AWS leaked the letter to BuzzFeed before sending it to Parler. Again, I don't see how that's relevant. Someone within AWS probably did leak it to a news site. That's not that shocking. That kind of thing happens all the time. Last evening, the AP reported that Parler may be the leading candidate for President Trump after his Twitter ban, as experts had predicted Trump might pop up on Parler. Trump seeks new online megaphone, Associated Press. However, the AP also observed that Amazon struck a blow Saturday against the chance of Trump adopting the platform, informing Parler it would need to look for a new web hosting service effective midnight Sunday. This death blow by AWS would not come at a worse time for Parler, a time when the company is surging with potential of even more explosive growth in the next few days. Worse than the timing is the result. Parler has tried to find alternative companies to host it, and they have fallen through. It has no other options. So again, they've said that there are other hosts they could theoretically go through, but they've all said no. That kind of goes to show that no one wants to do business with you, and that's kind of how the free market works, right? You're a shitty service that hosts terrorists, Nazis, conspiracy theorists, white supremacists, and basically all the worst people on the internet, right? So no one wants to work with you. No one wants to have your brand associated with them. I don't even know why they included this. This makes their case weaker because all they're saying is, oh, other companies also don't want to deal with us, and they have no anti-competitive reason to do so. They just also don't want to deal with us. Without AWS, Parler is finished as it has no way to get online. Again, not just AWS. You just said your other hosts have fallen through because they don't want to deal with you. So that's on you for being shitty. And a delay... You shouldn't start a sentence with and. Come on. And a delay of granting this TRO by even one day could also sound Parler's death knell as President Trump and others move onto other platforms. It's no wonder, then, that competitors, Twitch's CEO, has heartily endorsed efforts to remove Parler from the public sphere. Parler CEO John Matz responded angrily after Jack Dorsey endorsed Apple's removal of the social network favored by conservatives. Again, he can say that. He's allowed to say, like, yeah, good. It's funny that they're like, free speech, but then Twitter's CEO is like, yeah, fuck Parler, and they're like, you said a thing, I don't like it. Stupid. Parler's rival social media apps such as conservative-oriented Gab or conservative media Rumble are also experiencing record growth right now. See Isaac and Browning fact check on Facebook and Twitter. Serpa, if Parler is not available, people will turn to... Okay, so you're even saying that there are other alternatives. I mentioned Gab earlier, but there's also Rumble. So these exist. Why don't you go to their web hosting services? If Parler is not available, people will turn to alternatives or perhaps return to Twitter or Facebook. What's more, Parler's current users are likely to leave and go to another platform if Parler is down for an indefinite period, and once those users have begun to use another platform, they may not return to Parler once it's back online. And by silencing Parler, AWS silences the millions of Parler users who do not feel their free speech is protected by Twitter or other social media apps. Again, free speech... And we're not talking about, like, colloquially free speech here. This is a legal document. So they're saying that their free speech is being infringed upon and their users are being infringed upon, not by the government, but by a private entity who has no responsibility to protect your free speech whatsoever. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. What is more, by pulling the plug on Parler, but leaving Twitter alone despite identical conduct by both sides. Identical conduct by both sides is just patently untrue. Complete straw man bullshit. AWS reveals that its expressed reasons for suspending Parler's account are but pretext. In its note announcing the pending termination of Parler services, AWS alleges that over the past several weeks, we've reported 98 examples to Parler of posts that clearly encourage and incite violence, and there's some exhibits of that. Provide few examples, including one that stated, "How about make them hang," followed by a series of hashtags including F Mike Pence. AWS further stated to Parler that the violent content on your website violated our terms. Because AWS declared we cannot provide services to a customer that is unable to effectively identify and remove content that encourages or incites violence against others, AWS announced the pending termination of Parler's account. On Twitter, too, by the way, Twitter moderation takes a while, but they're usually not terrible. I report tweets all the time that are against TOS or, like, inciting violence or, like, being racist or using slurs or whatever, and within a week they like always get taken down. So even though it takes them a while to do it, they do take action on tweets like that. I think they could stand to beef up the amount of people who work in that department, but nonetheless they do end up working on it over time. Parler, on the other hand, like I said, their moderation is just hilarious in how inept it is. So that would be the difference. However, the day before, on Friday, one of the top trends on Twitter was Hang Mike Pence with over 14,000 tweets. See Peter at 8can hang Mike Pence trends on Twitter after platform suspends Trump for risk of incitement of violence. And earlier last week, Los Angeles Times columnists observed that Twitter and other social media platforms are partly culpable for the Capitol Hill riot by allowing rioters to communicate and rile each other up. Yeah, that would be you, mostly. I'm sure there were some people on Twitter and Facebook and stuff who were doing it, but a lot of it was happening on Parler. Yet the equivalent, if not greater, violation of AWS's terms of service by Twitter have apparently been ignored by AWS. AWS knew its allegations contained in the letter it leaked to the press that Parler was not able to find and remove content that encouraged violence was false because over the last few days Parler has removed everything AWS has brought to its attention and more. Yet AWS sought to defame Parler nonetheless, and because of AWS's false claims leaked to the public, Parler has not only lost current and future customers, but Parler has also been able to find an alternative web hosting company. In short, AWS false claims have made Parler a pariah. I'm sure it was Amazon's fault and not the fact that you harbored a community of terrorists, seditionists, racists, Nazis. There's crossover in all these, but I just want to cover all the bases. Conspiracy theorists, Karens, all of the above. So they're saying they broke the Sherman Act, breach of contract. This might be where it gets them. If they had a contract, although Amazon probably has a pretty solid legal department, they're one of the wealthiest companies in the world. So I imagine Amazon has things in their contract with Parler that basically said, hey, if you breach this, or this, then we can, terminate our contract. Amazon's lawyers don't fuck around, is what I'm trying to say. I would imagine they covered their ass on this. Count 3, tortious interference with a contract or business expediency. Again, yeah. Prayer for relief. Let's see what the relief is supposed to be. The relief being like what they want in compensation, not necessarily monetarily, although it can be. Plaintiff respectfully requests that the court grant Parler's motion for a temporary restraining order, AWS to maintain Parler's account until further notice from this court and to refrain from suspending, terminating, or failing to provide any services previously provided under Parler's customer agreement with AWS. That's interesting. They're going to have to rule at least on that part of the suit very soon, I would think, if they want it to be effective in any way, shape, or form. Because as far as I'm aware, right now Parler's down. They're already in this period where people can't get onto Parler. So I'm assuming they're going to want the judge or whoever gets assigned to this to look at this very, very quickly and see if they can get this restraining order. B, grant Parler damages, including trebled damages in an amount to be determined at trial. Grant Parler such other relief as the court deems just and proper, which is pretty typical for stuff like that. Just to leave it open for if they want to give something else. Respectfully submitted, David Grosbeck. And that's, he's just a lawyer. And yeah. I, John Mays, say that I am the chief executive officer of Parler, blah, 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 blah. Interesting stuff. Amazon filed a notice of intent to respond by the 12th. Yeah, I'm not shocked. I would imagine that I wouldn't want to deal with any lawyer. I've been in a lawsuit. It's a nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare, and it is terrible, and I would not recommend it to anyone unless you are grievously injured and you can also afford a really good lawyer. But out of all the lawyers to deal with, there are like two groups of lawyers I would never want to be dealing with ever, and that's Disney's lawyers and Amazon's lawyers. Those are the two groups that I'd be like, nah, what do they want me to do? I give up immediately. Because you're not going to win. I don't think you're going to win against Amazon, and I don't think you're going to win against Disney. So it'll be interesting, though. Well, when the ruling comes out on this, we'll take a look. I hope, again, either Legal Eagle or like Leonard French takes a look at this to give legal insight, because again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know anything about particular laws. I'm just trying to make assertions as to the specific claims in regard to like factuality. But yeah, I really hope someone with a legal background goes through the legal claims sometime soon, because I'm very curious if, despite the, what do I want to say, questionable nature of some of the motivations that Parler is putting on Amazon here, I'm curious if there is any case in terms of like their contract, right? I don't know what their contract looked like. I don't know if there was something in there that Amazon said, hey, if you do this, or this thing, then we're allowed to cut off your contract. I assume they did, because it's Amazon. I assume they cover their bases, and in any negotiation, Amazon is probably going to have more power and more cards at the table, so they can probably put stuff like that in the contract. Who knows, though? Very interesting, and we'll keep an eye on this case as it moves forward. It'll either be a really, really interesting lawsuit that'll go on way too long, and probably, I don't think Amazon would ever let this, actually, if they did have standing. I feel like Amazon probably wouldn't let it go to trial. They'd probably settle if Parler did have some sort of like substantive legal claim. But either that's going to happen, or it's going to get dropped almost immediately by the court. I don't know. We'll see what Amazon's response is. I'm hoping they hit back hard, because that'll be fun. Let's move on.